Buenas tardes a todos. Bueno, bienvenidos. Muchas gracias por haberse acercado a esta charla que es poco habitual. La sociedad teosófica en general, todos saben que solemos hablar de temas doctrinarios o temas sobre el trabajo de la sección, pero muy raramente se dedica una charla a la Orden Teosófica del Servicio y su trabajo. Y me pareció, bueno, que empezando este año 2021 y todavía no recuperándonos del trauma psicológico que nos dejó el 2020, era una buena forma de comenzarlo, sobre todo teniendo la posibilidad que nos da la tecnología de contar con el presidente internacional de la Sociedad Teosófica, que es al mismo tiempo el presidente internacional de la Orden Teosófica del Servicio. Por otro lado, adelanto a comentarles que la Orden Teosófica en cada país tiene un director o un presidente y que en este momento, hasta este momento, como la mayoría de ustedes sabrán, era el director para Argentina, Norberto Cicirelli, que ocupó ese cargo durante cerca de 20 años. Y bueno, él ha decidido dejar esta posición y estamos por nombrar a una nueva persona para que se haga cargo del trabajo en Argentina, del trabajo de coordinación nacional, ¿no? Pues cada sede, cada rama tiene su trabajo en forma particular. Bueno, como les decía recién, y ahora le voy a pedir a Willy que empiece a traducirme al inglés, contamos entre nosotros con nuestro presidente internacional, Tim Boyle, a quien ya obviamente hemos escuchado a través de videos, una entrevista que tuvimos el año pasado sobre el trabajo de la Sociedad Teosófica.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you very well.
Okay, great.
Bienvenido.
Welcome.
Es un honor para nosotros contar con tu presencia y quisiéramos que compartieras con nosotros algunas ideas y conceptos sobre el trabajo de la OTS a nivel internacional. Es habitual entre los miembros de Argentina el preguntarse por qué es necesaria una orden teosófica del servicio que funcione con cierta independencia de la sociedad teosófica y por qué la actividad de servicio no se hace directamente desde la sociedad teosófica.
First of all, I'm very happy to be here with you once again, even though it's digitally. The question that you ask is one that has been asked by many members in different sections around the world. Why is it that there are two organizations, both with the focus of theosophy? Probably, just a little bit of history might be useful. I'm sure that everyone knows that the Theosophical Order of Service was founded by Annie Besant in 1908. And this was actually 1 year after she became the president of the Theosophical Society following Colonel Olcott's death. One of the features of Annie Besant's way of living was that she was extremely active in social and political activity. And this was something that she was part of her history when she was in England and Ireland, but she continued with this when she came to India. She was a person who, wherever she saw human suffering, she tried to look at ways to alleviate it, to better that situation. One of the features of the Theosophical Society as an organization is that it is not aligned with any specific social or political cause. We cannot do that. Everyone who individually is a member is free to engage in these methods and does to a large degree. But her concern was that the many ways, the many avenues that members could serve could not be done in a way where it would be involving the Theosophical Society in any specific country. So she founded a different organization. So the Theosophical Order of Service came into being with this mind that service is a very important part of the theosophical life. But because there is such a broad range of causes where we cause suffering for one another, it had to be segregated so it would not allow for the political element to be involved with the Theosophical Society's work. Just the idea was not that the many things that people can work on as service cannot be things that can reflect on the Theosophical Society as political choices. In many countries, that's the way it's interpreted. Probably all of you are aware that the spiritual practice that is described, the theosophical description of a spiritual practice, involves three elements, three things. It involves study, meditation, and the third one is service. My observation is that with our members generally, study and to a lesser degree, meditation are clear to members of the Theosophical Society. This is something that we need to practice. And very often, this third pillar of the theosophical practice is more easily ignored. But from my perspective and from my own history within the Theosophical Society, my own life as well, it is a mistaken idea that a valid practice can only stand on two legs of study, of meditation. So in some form or another, in order to really activate our understandings that we gain from study and that we gain from meditation, they do not become active until they are expressed in some form of service. Actually, from my own personal way of expressing it, service is the word that we use most commonly. Everyone's aware of that. But to me, I think of it in terms of conscious, compassionate activity is what service is. So this is the importance of a theosophical order of service, that around the world, for members of the Theosophical Society, it provides a focus and a community through which this service activity can be expressed, can be visualized, can be imagined, and can be acted upon. Es todo.
Okay. So thank you. I think it's very clear for us. Can you tell something about, excuse me, ¿puedes explicarnos algo sobre la estructura organizativa a nivel internacional de la Orden Teosófica del Servicio?
Yeah, I understand that, Guillermo.
Okay.
The way the Theosophical Society is structured is often it's different in every section of the Theosophical Society. The overall structure is that the president, the international president of the Theosophical Society, is the head of the Theosophical Order of Service. And in each country that is active, a head of that section is appointed with the approval of the international president. And then within that section, then they have the capacity to organize themselves as they see fit. Generally, it involves a group of people forming a committee, a council, where it becomes more formal and more organized. Then they even have boards of directors. And so this is a description just of the structure of the Theosophical Order of Service.
¿Y cuál es la relación a nivel administrativo entre las dos organizaciones.
At the administrative level, they are two distinct legal organizations. So that's the legal aspect. In terms of the way they function in every country, it's a little bit different. I have to say that for the Theosophical Society internationally, there are officers of the International Society, myself, a vice president, a treasurer, and an international secretary are the officers of the International Theosophical Society. And all of the officers of the Theosophical Society internationally have been and continue to be active in Theosophical Order of Service activities. In almost every country, the view of the work of the Theosophical Order of Service and the Theosophical Society is one of very, very closeness. It's a very close relationship. In many ways, in many places, the two organizations and their work and their membership is completely indistinguishable. They are all together. So that's a little bit of a description of how they work together. Some places they are much more closely aligned, and in other places they recognize themselves as distinct, but they are mutually cooperative. And just for an example, at the international headquarters of the Theosophical Society, it is the administrative headquarters for the Theosophical Society worldwide. So at the Theosophical Society's headquarters, we are engaged in a number of specifically service-based activities, which is the Theosophical Society's work. We operate two schools. One of them is completely free for children who are disadvantaged, very, very poor children. We operate a vocational training center for women so that they can find work and also contribute to supporting their families, also for people who are disadvantaged. We have an animal clinic that we used to operate, but it fell into disuse. But we have revived it, and it has become extremely active in care, mainly for injured and for stray animals in Chennai. We operate a medical clinic, a free medical clinic. We actually have two, one for the workers and staff, and one that operates one time a month, also on our campus. And these are activities that have no involvement with the study of theosophical texts or the understanding of theosophical lectures. These are activities that have been undertaken purely because where we see an avenue to do something about suffering, we must do something. And similar or almost identical activities are taking place within Theosophical Order of Service in different places around the world.
¿Puedes darnos algunos ejemplos de cómo trabaja la sociedad teosófica en otros países? Por ejemplo, en Estados Unidos, en Francia, en Australia.
Sure. Before becoming international president of the Theosophical, actually before becoming president in the United States, I was president of the Theosophical Order of Service. So in countries like the United States, you have a reasonably well-developed social network for people, to care for people. You have medical, you have different things like that. And by the standards of the world, the United States tends to be viewed as a wealthy nation. So the type of activity that we engaged in would be perhaps different than the activities you would see in India and even in the Philippines and other places. And one of the things that I realized was that there are many, many organizations in the United States that are doing excellent service work and who are doing it at a level that the TOS could not duplicate. So what we found was that we could provide often the maximum benefit by partnering with these existing organizations. And we would do it in a couple of ways. One of the ways might be that where there was the possibility for people to actually work hands-on in those organizations, we could direct people to help with it. And in other cases, we could raise funds, monies, to help with the work that they are doing there. And so a lot of what we did in the United States was to try and identify groups with which we could partner in service work where our input would have the maximum effect. So we have worked with groups that provided care and materials for homeless people. In the United States, there is an issue of the populations of Native American people, the original, what they call the Indians who were here, that their populations have many difficulties. And we have provided scholarships for students from that group. So that's the United States. One thing we also did at one point, there was a group of members from the Theosophical Society who went on a tour through Tibet to see the spaces where Blavatsky had been. This was 12, 13 years ago. And during that time, we connected with an orphanage that was doing work with Tibetan children in this area. And we provided funds for them to build bathrooms and to redo the water system for this orphanage. And in part because of that work that we did for that orphanage in Tibet, this was one of the reasons why in 2010 we met with the Dalai Lama, and then he later came for the Theosophical Society in America to sponsor his visit to Chicago because of the work of the TOS. So other countries operate differently. Probably the most active country in the world for a Theosophical order of service is India. And so, for instance, during this pandemic period, India, of course, has a stratified population with many people who are very, very poor. And during this pandemic period, there was, for many of them, it was very difficult to even find ways to feed themselves, the most basic things. The Theosophical order of service throughout India, in the various of India, organized, and during every single day of this pandemic, they managed to provide food for hungry people. Theosophical Society in the Philippines has similar issues, and they organized also to assist in providing food aid to many people in their areas. Additionally, in these areas, you have such things as cyclones and hurricanes, earthquakes that periodically occur, volcanic eruptions, and the Theosophical Society in these areas is always active. In India, we have flooding very frequently. So it's different according to the country. We could talk specifics about individual countries, but this is just to give you a picture from a nation such as the United States. Italy is extremely active, but their work is primarily in giving financial aid and helping to fund initiatives that will help in different places in the world, as well as in India. I'll give you another example. Singapore. Singapore is one of the richest countries and one of the most stable countries in the world. So their level of problems are nothing like India nothing like the United States, Italy, Argentina. Their problems are of a different sort. And for many, many years, they didn't have a theosophical order of service because they couldn't think what they would do. But in the last several years, we've spoken with them. They've begun and they've become very active. A lot of it is raising funds, but also they have also identified areas that can stand for improvement in Singapore. I mean, for instance, student suicide is a huge problem in Singapore from the pressures of student life. So, I mean, the fact of it is, anyone who has eyes, all of us can see that if you were born, if you breathe, there is suffering. And there is suffering that we are causing for each other. And there is suffering that is just a function of being alive. We grow old. We get ill. We die. Many people die alone. There's nobody to even sit with them as they're passing. And so these are areas that no matter how rich the nation, there are always areas of deep human need. And sometimes the only qualification that is required is the ability to listen to another human being's voice.
Olvidé de comentar en la introducción que todos aquellos asistentes que quieran hacer alguna pregunta pueden utilizar el chat que está habilitado y pueden volcar ahí algún comentario o pregunta para luego transmitírselo a Tim en inglés. La siguiente pregunta, que va a traducir Marcela, apunta a cómo ve el rol de un director nacional de la OTS, específicamente en Argentina. ¿Cuál sería su tarea? Y la pregunta surge...
Okay, Tim, next question. Stephen would like you to explain about the role of the person in charge of the TOS in Argentina.
Pregunto esto.
I ask you this because
principalmente el trabajo en Argentina está llevado a cabo por la OTS emparentada con cada rama o sede donde la sociedad en Argentina existe.
I'm asking you this because each place where the TOS works is related, is in a close relationship with any lodge of the same place. Or the lodge of the place where it works.
Entonces vuelvo a cuál sería el rol de un director nacional.
What would be, according to your point of view, the role of the president of the TOS in TOS in this country, in Argentina?
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, the real role of the director is not to direct and to command, but to find ways to help people to identify directions in which they can serve and help them in developing the ideas, the resources, and the people necessary. So there are countless avenues along which we can work. But the key is to identify them. And then once you focus on things, my experience again, that once we become clear in what it is we are looking at, the resources required have a way of finding you. It's oftentimes is rather miraculous and odd the way these things work. And, honestly, it is in this area that the teachings that we study, that we meditate upon, when we actually start to try to become active in service, this is when these things become real to us. Because we start to find that actually we think about these other levels of consciousness that support the work that we're doing. And unless we give these avenues a means of expressing, it remains just an idea. In this act of service, we invite the presence of these deeper consciousness to work through us. And every time there is an opening that we provide, we find that we are assisted. It's just one of the laws. It's the way it works. Just to be brief, every theosophist that I know, in their speech and in their desire, wants for the masters to touch them, to enlighten them. But why bother unless there is something for the benefit of humanity? So to get back specifically to your question, the role of a director will be to enhance and identify the opportunities to serve. The members themselves will come up with ideas. And the way things often work, many of them are out of reach, but some of them you can try. Not all will succeed. And so those ones will survive and become stronger. And then you add to it. And you'll get the assistance that you need. It may not seem like it at the beginning, but it works that way.
Algunos miembros quieren hacer algunas preguntas que les están volcando en el chat. Sigue Guillermo.
Which areas of service do you think, from your point of view, are more important to pursue in Argentina? As which areas would be more important, as we may be from within Argentina are not as impartial as you could be?
It's, for me, because I'm really not deeply familiar with the social situation or economic situation in Argentina, I may not be able to speak very specifically, but I can give general ideas. I know that probably there are people who are homeless in Argentina, especially in its cities, I would imagine. And so that's a population that always has needs from food. One of the things that was done here in the United States, put together a package, and it included socks, underwear, some very basic things you wouldn't even think about, that is greatly needed and appreciated. In every country, there are people who are dying, and hospice work is something that's not for everybody, perhaps, but it's a very, very important work to accompany somebody in this last round of life. In every country of the world, there are young people who are trying to figure out how they should live their life, or trying to figure out how they can find a safe space. And, from the theosophical point of view, we're not talking about a safe space where they can sit and be lectured to by older people. That's not what we're talking about. I mean, at the Theosophical Society in Adyar, we are in the process even now of trying something, of opening a space, and we will have ping pong table, we will have chessboard, we will have those sorts of things for younger people. And it will be a safe space, but it will also be a space where, for those who have that interest, we will have, books about theosophical subjects. We will have opportunities for meditation practice, music, the range of activities. But the idea is not to convert these people to theosophy. The idea is to provide an environment that is an example of what it means to live theosophically, to serve
Entonces,
in that manner.
Ok, thank you. Hay una segunda pregunta que tal vez podría traducir Marcela.
Yes, this is a question from Roberto Cicirelli from the TOS in Argentina. Norberto says that altruism to which Master KH refers is applied to the TOS work. What can you say about it?
Well, the motto for the Theosophical Order of Service is a union of those who love in service to all that suffer. Yeah. So the idea of altruism is this expression of compassionate activity. And, one of the things that is emphasized by KH is that these things have to be exemplified, not just spoken of. We have to.
Hay una pregunta que me parece especialmente interesante porque muchos miembros en Argentina, e imagino que en otros lugares del mundo también, que interpretan que trabajar por la difusión de la teosofía es por sí una actividad de servicio. Can you tell something about that?
No, I would say that whoever has that belief is 100% correct. The difficulty we always face is that while something has value, unless that can be received by the person you're giving it to, then it has no value. I think that very often we focus our efforts on a very particular type of temperament. My daughter, she was the top student in her class, ended up being the valedictorian for her high school class. But earlier in her academic career, she struggled enormously because it turned out she had a learning disability. And so the ways that mathematics and other subjects were normally taught, it could not register for her, and she could not do well. She was able to receive help to be able to receive these informations in different ways that suited her particular mental structure, and she flourished. So often I do believe we make the mistake of believing that the sharing of high quality information is sufficient, and it often is not. Very often, people can have the deepest level of spiritual experience through experience and expression of simple kindness from another person. In the spiritual texts of the world, there are phrases like, even the stones can preach sermons.
In your heart.
Stones can preach sermons that will move your heart. So the important part for us is not to think in terms of branding the theosophical movement or the theosophical wisdom, but to think in terms of ways that we can connect with other human beings.
Tal vez podríamos ver como que la enseñanza tiene que ser acompañada del ejemplo, que muchas veces el ejemplo es la mejor forma de transmitir una enseñanza.
Actually, Albert Schweitzer, the Nobel Prize winner and humanitarian, said something similar. What he said, though, was that example is not the best way to teach. It's the only way to teach.
Bueno, ya hemos alcanzado el tiempo que teníamos establecido para nuestra charla. no queremos abusar de nuestro invitado.
Well, I have to say, in this respect, the members of Argentina are very different than the rest of the world.
We had established 1 hour for this activity, so we are very grateful for your time and patience, and we hope to have some opportunity to share your thoughts before the end of this year.
I look forward.
Ok, me estoy despidiendo de Tim, agradeciéndole su tiempo y su presencia y comprometiéndolo para alguna otra intercambio de ideas antes del fin de este año. Ok, thank you. Vamos a
Gracias a todos.
despedirnos y a
Thank you
abrir
very
los
much.
micrófonos por si alguien quiere hacer comentarios de manera informal, pero we will stay here. We are free to go to talk in Spanish.
All right.
Between us about what okay.
All right. Thank you all. Bye-bye. Thank you,
Okay.
Marcelo. Thank you, Willie.
Bye-bye. See you,
Bye.
Tim.
Bye bye. Bueno, se despide Tim con un agradecimiento a los dos traductores. Marcela, muchas gracias. Y Guillermo, muchas gracias por el esfuerzo que sabemos que es grande.